This is the Pennyworth podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're here for the finale of Pennyworth Season 2, The Lion and Lamb.
For once in my life, I wanted to do something useful. Something important.
What are you talking about? Your whole life you've been useful and important.
No. I was a servant. A lackey. Bowed and served. And opened doors for me betters.
Not them. Me. You were important to me. Unuseful. Now and again.
Welcome back, fellow governors and Gothamites. We're back with the finale of Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 10, The Lion and Lamb. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow governors. I am one of your other hosts, John. Yes, The Lion and the Lamb. Although no lions and no lambs in this episode.
Figuratively speaking, there may have been a lion and a lamb in the episode.
Certainly.
You know, we've been podcasting about Bruno Heller's vision of the DC world for a very long time. We covered every episode of Gotham when it was on, which was 5 seasons of that show. And we've also covered now 2 seasons of Pennyworth. Some friends of ours who also podcasted at the Bill Meeks and Anne-Marie DeSimone used to do Legends of Gotham, and they used to have a section in their episodes called That's So Gotham. And as I was watching the finale of Pennyworth, all I could think of was, this is so Gotham.
Oh yeah. I think these last 2 episodes have had that so Gotham.
I think since the return of Davos, aka Mr. Pennyworth, in his wheelchair, since that return where he's got the flashing lights on the front, it really felt like something directly out of their DC universe in Gotham and now in Pennyworth.
Yeah, definitely. And taking a terror bomb and converting that into, dare I say it, a superhero, or dare I say it, super soldier.
Yes, super soldier.
Then certainly that also was pretty crazy. Very Gotham, I think. Yes. But that was one of the wonders of Gotham, and I think there's elements absolutely in Pennyworth that it was kooky and weird and wonderful.
Definitely.
It made it wonderful.
Yeah.
It was on the right side of it. Yeah. And it was like, it just was like, where are they going to go with this? Exactly. And I guess this is the last episode. So if we are to know where they are going to go with it, then certainly there would need to be a season 3.
Exactly. Yes, there's no confirmed season 3. We did talk about this before. Bruno Heller has said he is writing season 3, and he's delighted where he's finished his 4 major characters, which is Thomas Wayne, Martha Wayne, Alfred Pennyworth, and Lucius Fox, the 4 pillars, as he calls them, of the creation of Batman, effectively. So he's delighted where he's left them at the end of season 2, and he's already written a lot of season 3. He says he's broken it and knows exactly how it's going to go, but we don't know whether we're going to be back for season 3, so we're going to take season 2 as the finale of the show as it is. This is obviously going to be our spoiler-filled discussion for this. If you haven't watched season 2, there's so many big revelations, so many big moments, and so many big shocks. Bruno Heller did it again. He's twisted quite significantly away from what we expected to happen in this finale.
Absolutely, but one of the things I've probably said quite a lot on this podcast, Gotham TV podcast, and on Defenders TV podcast, this intermingling of TV, movies, and comic material, and how they can inform one another and what possibilities may come from it. There's a really interesting idea in this episode in particular that will be one of our main points, given the ramifications that it has for the Wayne family, that
and the Batverse as a whole,
and the Batverse as a whole. But that any comic book writer, any comic book artist could, literally take that up and run with it in terms of creating a storyline around the premise that has been established here. And that's what I kind of really like. This idea of this cross pollination that can happen, not always, sometimes never, but that can happen with the TV shows pushing new envelopes and the comics and the movies doing the same thing, and then it being taken up in another form of this comic universe that we're in.
Exactly.
So, it's always really creative, good stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Before we get into the episode, just to make sure as we're closing out our Pennyworth podcast, there'll be nothing else going on this feed, on the Pennyworth feed for a while. So make sure you join us over on our main feed on TV Podcast Industries. You can find that through tvpodcastindustries.com, our main website, or just search TV Podcast Industries. You'll get all of the other coverage that we do on a weekly basis. We've done just over 560 episodes of the podcast covering multiple TV shows. Right now we're covering Falcon and the Winter Soldier, season 1. We've got 4 episodes in, 2 more episodes to go for that show. We're also covering Invincible, the animated show from Image Comics and Robert Kirkman, which is airing weekly over on Amazon Prime. So lots of comics coverage that we're doing over in TV Podcast Industries. We'd love if you joined us for those podcasts as well as the Pennyworth podcast. Since it's finished and since we don't know when it's returned, we don't want to say goodbye to you just yet. Come join us for all the other stuff we're covering.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we've literally just finished up at the start of March our WandaVision coverage as well. So there's plenty to dive into over on tvpodcastindustries.com. So please join us, support us, subscribe, leave a review, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love.
Absolutely. And while we may be going away from Pennyworth, you can always email us. You can always reach out to us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. If you have any thoughts or just want to catch up about Pennyworth in between series, more than welcome to contact us over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get into our spoiler-filled discussion about The Lion and Lamb, the 10th and final episode of season 2 of Pennyworth. This episode was written by showrunner and creator of Pennyworth, the TV show, Bruno Heller. And yes, you can tell, as we mentioned earlier on, episode directed by Rob Bailey, who's done a number of episodes this season, some of the really good episodes of Pennyworth as well. So a good collaborator on board for this final episode.
Yes, and your theory holds up that the showrunner writing the first and last episodes of the series, at least those two, is always a good sign. It shows their creative juices are on board for the majority of the season, even though there may be a writer's room or other writers involved in the show and for individual episodes. So well done. Creative juices from Bruno Heller.
Well, John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the finale of season 2 of Pennyworth?
Sure. With the recovered vial of Stormcloud in hand, Alfie, Lucius, Daveboy and Thomas, along with his father, drive back to London in triumph. As Alfie returns to tell his mother of his dad's survival, and Stormcloud is taken to the English League, all is not quite as triumphant as they appear. Gully Troy is looking for Alfie, his father has something to hide, and the vial containing Stormcloud is a fake. At the Raven Union headquarters, John Salt rejects the League's unconditional surrender after they discover his ruse, and he makes his way up to his penthouse ready to unleash the real Stormcloud, safely positioned in London, ready for detonation. Back in London, with all hope lost, some try and make a run for it, while Thomas and Martha say yes, and ask Prime Minister Aziz to marry them.
Yay!
Meanwhile, back at Alfie's home, Mrs. Pennyworth is shocked to see her husband, but finds it in her heart to forgive him. However, the atmosphere is uncomfortable and tense, and things get worse when Alfie learns of his father's involvement in the Raven Union's deception. Upset and angry, Alfie's home truths to his father and some words from his wife convince him to reveal the location of Stormcloud, which is in Lord Harwood's coffin.
Also yay.
As they race against time to defuse the bomb, they are helped when Salt runs into the fists and boots of Bet and Peggy Sykes back at Raven Union headquarters. But Salt manages to push the trigger, but is arrested by the army, and Francis Gaunt resumes leadership of the Raven Union. In London, Stormcloud activates, but quick thinking sees Gully swallow the capsule, preventing a devastating detonation. But unfortunately for Gully, it detonates in his stomach. 6 months later, as the Raven Union launches its final assault on London, Martha gives birth to a girl, and the English League, led by Alfie and Bet Sykes, unleash a new weapon on the Raven Union forces.
Could they have done more in episode 10 of season 2 of Pennyworth? There's so much going on here, so many great points hit in this final episode, and so many interesting twists and turns. Lots to talk about here. But the first thing I want to kick off with, John, you mentioned in your synopsis that Lucius, Dave, Boy and Thomas, along with Alfie's father, drive back to London in Triumph. They don't drive back in a Triumph. They drive back in another car.
They
That's very,
do.
very visible if you're a fan of old 60s Batman. I don't know whether we didn't notice it in last week's episode.
We didn't.
Whether it was just not as clear in the last episode.
I think I was too bamboozled by the fluttering flags of the Stars and Stripes.
Maybe that's it, but I'm sure they expected us all to notice that this looks exactly like the Batmobile from Adam West's Batman that they're driving around in. So, is that car? Is that Alfred Pennyworth's car that he brings with him over to, or is that Thomas Wayne's car that he brings with him over to Gotham, and it becomes the Batmobile? Is that what happens?
No, well, I just took it that it is the US Embassy's car.
Yeah.
So I guess if there are a few lying around, if they are kind of US government issue, then
Thomas may
maybe
just take
Thomas picks one up.
Maybe Thomas provided it.
But it's ultimately a black Cadillac, so it's pretty, I guess,
it's the
ubiquitous.
Yeah, but it's the red interior and the black Cadillac that make it look exactly like the
Oh,
Batmobile.
absolutely.
Now,
It's a clear reference
Yeah.
to the Batmobile from the 60s Batman, which is fantastic. But I guess this one will be left in the UK.
You never know. You never know. They may bring it with them when they go over to Gotham eventually. But I know the actual Batmobile that was on Adam West's Batman show, that was a concept car. There weren't very many of those produced. So this is a reference rather than the exact car, because it's been a very long time since that car was out there. But just to point it out, we did notice that this episode looked really cool with Alfie and Dave Boy in the car, definitely looking like Batman and Robin in the car. That was very cool.
Yes, and Alfie's dad is still on the back seat there, looking like the dog with its ears flapping in the wind out of the back of a car. But they're taking Mr. Pennyworth back to Mrs. Pennyworth.
Absolutely. That kind of kicks off our first point, as usual. Alfie and the boys in the job, because there's always a job, and there's always Alfie and a rotating group of boys. This time, as always, Dave Boy at his side, but a rotating group of the lads, really. In this moment, as we said, everybody's together, with Thomas and everybody returning from Ravenhead HQ. Will we talk about the job here? What actually happens? So, Gully has gone to threaten Alfie back at his home after recovering from his attack. He calls in on Mrs. P to chat to her about where Alfie could be, and he does have a great tete-a-tete, let's say, with Mrs. P, where she gives him a bit of what for. Tells him what kind of woman his wife really is.
She does say that, Alfie has been a naughty boy and she is sorry for him, but she does say that his wife is all silk blouse and no knickers.
Love it.
Which is a great turn of phrase from Mrs. Pennyworth to Gully, who, yes, is like, like a dog with a bone. He just won't give up and is searching around all of Alfie's haunts to try and find him as he's on the way back into London.
Yeah.
So Alfie drops off Lucius and Thomas at the English League's headquarters with the vial of Stormcloud. Yeah. Whilst he and his father head on over to the family home. But it's in this moment that they're all celebrating. Everyone is high on life, on triumph. They're all wanting to see the faces of the Raven Union High Command, realizing that they have, they've failed effectively.
Yeah.
We see Gully then storming in, coming to the English League High Command to see where Alfie is, and spots this a bit like me with the Stars and Stripes fluttering in last week's episode. Gets bamboozled by the bright blue light of Stormcloud and accidentally drops it, and this is the moment where as it releases, as the casing cracks, everyone suddenly realizes that they're not dead.
Yeah.
And this is when, cut to the Raven Union, we see that immediately Aziz is effectively giving the unconditional surrender of the English League forces, of which Salt is not having any of it. He says, in a sense, he's always wanted to drop it. And this comes out from Field Marshal Thursday, where he says you had no intention of allowing them to surrender. This was always your plan. And it has been. It's been his design all the way through. But it's kind of, this is the thing that happens here. And coupled to this then is what happens at Alfie's homes. First off, there's the big reintroduction of his dad to his mother.
Yes.
But also there is the deception that his dad has done, which is primarily that he knows of the plan, but has kept the secret because he doesn't need to detonate it. That's being done remotely by John Salt.
Exactly.
It is simply to give them the illusion of triumph, and do this deception. And of course, the reintroduction of it, a great pot of tea is wasted with his reintroduction as Mrs. Pennyworth faints. She's delighted to see Alfie, but then all of a sudden, this Dalek-like creature appears in the kind of musty atmosphere of the Pennyworth home. And I love the fact that he's holding a bouquet of flowers because it is kind of like, nature versus technology.
Well, yes.
You just could imagine that he would kind of crush them or like run over them in his wheelchair. Massive pot of tea wasted as she faints and comes back around. And I have to say, these actually are really, these scenes in their home are really powerful. Between his dad and his mum in terms of their reconciliation, this idea, I wanted to be somebody, I wanted to do something. I only ever felt I was a servant. I doffed the cap, I bent the knee, for people richer than me, but no better. All of this kind of thing. And he felt he was worthless and that he didn't matter. And, you get this really strong emotional link with, with Mrs. Pennyworth saying, but you mattered to me. You mattered to us, that, you just didn't appreciate what you had, or who loved you, who appreciated you. And this is, I think it's really good stuff here.
Absolutely. And it's talking about the radicalization of this character, It's talking about the fact that he was a servant. He was a manservant or a butler, for the upper classes. So what you do have is this kind of thing that's run through a lot of the Batman stories. We saw it in The Dark Knight Rises, this idea of the middle class rising up against the rich, effectively. But then you take a look at the people that are heading up the Raven Union. And for the most part, they're lords and ladies. Yeah. So, you did have Lord Harwood. You now have Sir John Salt, leading up, the Raven Union. And their opponents are also very rich people. You have the Queen as a leader of the English League, along with the Prime Minister, effectively. So while you get his understanding that he wants to rise up and change the status quo, and that's why the Raven Union is formed, and that's why he's so on board in the Raven Union side, what you hear from him is these excuses for falling in with this and him not realizing what he had. I kind of like hearing Mrs. Pennyworth say to him, I didn't realize how unhappy you were. Because if you'd been happier in our situation, then you wouldn't have been as stupid as you were, to join this group, effectively. So that's what gets to him, really. that idea that he's let his wife down. While you said in your synopsis she forgives him, but knows he's been stupid. It's not like she's
and
forgetting
has done wrong. I mean, she says, "I didn't realize you were so unhappy." I mean, that you get this real sense of depression from him. That he didn't understand the people who cared for him, who loved him, and that stiff upper lip, that, you know, rigid protocol of serving, just inhibited him. I mean, it really does, to me, it almost has echoes of Howard's End with Anthony Hopkins. The portrayal of the servant as being emotionally undeveloped, not able to deal with, I guess, a wider reality from their service, and the soft relationships and social nuances in an informal setting, you know, that kind of thing, or you know, blind obedience in whatever form that comes, because effectively he's gone from that butler figure to, you know, carrying out the plan of the Raven Union to the point that he will sacrifice not only himself but his wife and son. Exactly. And I think that comes to one of the other great aspects of here, is that, you know, we talk about the deception, and Alfred gets a call from Aziz to say that the Stormcloud file was a dud, and it's not the deception to the wider organization. I mean, the whole atmosphere anyway is tense and slightly strange. It's weird, you know, because they thought he was dead, and they're all dealing with that.
I love how Alfie leads into it with his father saying to him, "No proclamations, no explanations, no speeches to Mom. I want you to go back and apologize to her, and that's it, or else you're not going back at all," basically. Because he's had that line about, you know, if some things are worth dying for, they're worth killing for. And Alfie's like, nah, none of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, dare I say it, you could cut the tension with a plain digestive biscuit. That is, I have to absolutely disagree with Dave Boy, is literally the worst biscuit you could possibly, maybe with some chocolate on it. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's a great dipping biscuit. And its comparative is that it's much better than Jaffa cake. Save those. You get your dipping biscuit for your tea. I understand. It's very plain, but I like it. But anyway, yes, Alfie's reaction to the phone call when he gets it from Aziz is so good. This moment where he's saying to his father,
Jack Bannon again really delivers a great emotional performance here.
Yeah. But when he's saying to his father, you know, why have you done this? And his father's saying, well, because we're nobodies, we can sacrifice people like us for the greater good. The greater good. And Alfie's kind of going, she's not nobody, she's my mom. Why would you kill her? You know, it's a really good performance from Jack Bannon.
Exactly. But it was also him personally, as much for his mum, but for himself. You know, I thought I was getting my dad back, he says. Yes. He says, I thought, you know, you gave me the gun because I was your son and because you loved me, not because of some deception. I mean, it is this idea of feeling betrayed here and protective of his mother, and about their relationship and their love, that he somehow seems to be casting everything, their entire family relationship, the years they've spent, aside. And it's delivered really, really well by Jack Bannon here. I must say, I really thought it was quite powerful. Yeah. And I think, you know, ultimately this blast of emotion and anger by Alfred, along with, you know, his mum, ultimately convinces his dad. I mean, it all centers around this picture of him and Alfie, a black and white photograph.
Yeah, absolutely love that moment when Alfie smashes the picture frame of that picture, and his mom gets really annoyed, saying she bought that then in Wicks for 10 shillings. You know, really expensive photo frame. Why are you smashing that? You know, it's a really good scene, but kind of leads us into his father finally making the turn to the right side, and revealing that Well, revealing that we were right, finally, that one of the only things we get right about this episode, we were right. The funeral that had happened for Lord Harwood was a way of John Salt placing Stormcloud in London without anybody finding out. Stormcloud is in the coffin with the body of Lord Harwood in the church. This is revealed by Mr. P to Pennyworth and Dave Boy, and they rush off to the church to try and stop it in as I say, in a real Batman and Robin way. You know, you see them arriving, stopping the car, running into the church, and then getting confronted by a priest inside. A gun-toting priest, because, again, This is Pennyworth. Yeah. So, of course, we're going to see a gun-toting priest inside. I wasn't sure, because there's no real declaration of it in the episode. I wasn't sure whether the priest is a member of the Raven Union who is supposed to be protecting the body of Lord Harwood, or is he just a priest that's really unhappy with people grave robbing? Is it just he's so used to London now he carries a gun?
Well, I guess the way in which he was unceremoniously dispatched by Gully, which is effectively he's executed with a bullet to the head, then it would kind of lead you towards that he is, yes, this kind of undercover guard to some extent. But I actually just took it as a regular chaplain or priest, who had seen two people rifling through the coffin of a dead person and an important dead person lying kind of in state, I guess. Yeah. And so I thought the comedic element was that, you know, he came out with this machine gun and starts firing on them. It kind of does, you know, it's that comedy element of the, you know, one of the ladies, a lady picking up a machine gun with a big hairdo, and all the kickback start, you know, the hair begins to disintegrate as the, you know, the beehive starts to fall apart. And it felt the same here. This chaplain wielding this, you know, this lethal weapon. But ultimately he does get taken out.
Absolutely. It does kind of remind me of the start of the season when we were hoping we were going to see lots of grannies with guns, because that's what we saw in the first episode. We saw the grannies with guns in the first episode, and now we see a priest with a gun, a priest with an assault rifle, taking them down. But yes, Gully arrives with Lucius Fox, hopefully going to be able to be the team together, these four people together, hopefully going to be the ones to stop Stormcloud from exploding. Because what we hear from John Salt, he doesn't give a timeline on it. They usually do give a timeline, but he doesn't give a timeline. He says he's going to set off Stormcloud in London, but they won't have time to get out.
Yeah.
So everybody has to stay there. They'll have time enough to say goodbyes. It's really because...
Exactly. It's about an hour, he says, at Raven Union, but it's ultimately not enough time for them to escape, but enough time for them to say goodbye.
And only because Mr. P has told them where the bomb is that they've been able to get there with enough time to save it effectively. I like that they have Lucius Fox here, one of the creators of Stormcloud, along with the other scientists in the Raven Union. Hopefully he's going to be able to stop it. But unfortunately, the button is pushed as he's going through his steps of saving it. He says the only way to stop it now, there is a way to cancel out Stormcloud, which is by putting it into a metal box and dropping it into the ocean, which they definitely don't have time to do.
No.
And then the decision is taken by Alfie, first off, to potentially, maybe if I swallow it, that would stop the bomb from going off.
This was the lovely, weird element. So it looked like a big, you know, bright blue glowing gobstopper. And it was like, I'm going to swallow this, you know, wash it down with Dave Boy's whiskey.
Yeah.
But then we get the chain of command thing from Gully. It goes, no, I'm the senior officer here. I'm going to do it.
If anyone's going to be a hero here, it's going to be me.
And so you have
I love the idea
the craziness of it all, but it is kind of, it's the weird, wonderful element here.
But I love the idea of it. What could it hurt? If the bomb goes off, we're all dead. If I swallow the bomb and it doesn't do anything, we're all dead anyway. So I might as well try and see if by swallowing it, it'll stop the bomb from going off. Yes, so it is Gully that swallows it, and he gets taken out and brought into ambulance later on by the attendants, because it doesn't it doesn't go off and kill everybody in the room. It just turns Gully blue effectively. So kind of like something out of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. He's been turned blue, or violet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it immediately, screams Mr. Freeze type blue as well to some extent.
Yeah.
But once the explosion has gone off and he's fallen to the floor of the church, the colour drains from him slightly. So you see the blue rising up around his neck and then onto his face.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like he dies. And so the colour drains and is carted off by the, hazardous containment unit.
Yes. Now, two things in this episode. So this is the second one of them. Two things in this episode. So the explosion in the hazardous van, you see the blue smoke rising, you see the explosion, and Alfie goes up and opens the door of it.
Yeah, and you see the wisps of blue smoke coming round the door, and you're like thinking, could he still die?
Well, that's the containment unit. If Stormcloud is being released now, he's just opened the containment unit, possibly killing all of London, effectively. If this was just a delay to the reaction.
But it was coming out anyway, but I guess Lucius says it must be that Stormcloud was deactivated by some bioenzyme in his stomach. So I guess...
Boffins.
I guess that's what happened ultimately.
But I love that he has no answer to it. But yes, you don't go up and open the door because he may have just slowed down the explosion. But it's the second time in this episode because even that moment when in the English League, when they're holding what they thought was Stormcloud, it's not exactly protected from somebody sitting on it by mistake, Gully picking it up and dropping it on the floor and smashing it by mistake.
It's the first time when Lucius says at the English League headquarters and in front of Aziz and all the high command, effectively, the leading politicians, that it needs to be put in a hermetically sealed box and buried. My question would be, why would you take a terror bomb to your prime minister? It's kind of like... that's not what you do.
I know. There's health and safety and there's checks these people should be doing. But luckily, it doesn't turn out as bad as it could have. There is no Stormcloud in London. And that's kind of where we leave Alfie and the boys in the job there, effectively. They've saved London from Stormcloud. It hasn't gone off. And the only person that seems to have been affected by it is Gully by swallowing Stormcloud.
Yes. And apparently is maybe not as dead as we think because of what happens in the ambulance, where, there's all this kind of rocking of the vehicle and so on. So you think he's dead, but it looks like he could still be alive, but you get the shock horror from Alfie on his face.
Exactly.
But that's ultimately where it ends in that sense.
Yeah. I want to give a big shout out to Patrick Lemke, one of our listeners over on Twitter, who contacted us to say that this is possibly a reference to a DC Comics character. A character that was actually created in the 40s. During the war, it was eventually became a DC character. A character called Human Bomb. The character itself was Roy Lincoln. What happened with this character, and you like the origin story here, John. So effectively himself and his father were creating a big weapon to destroy foreign armies. When they were attacked and the weapon was going to be taken from them, Roy Lincoln took it upon himself to swallow the weapon, hoping that it would protect it from getting into the hands of the enemy, thinking it would kill him, and it doesn't kill him. It turns him into the Human Bomb, a person that can throw explosives at people from his body, effectively.
Yeah.
He did continue throughout DC for many, many years. He's been featured in multiple times in multiple comics over the years. So good catch there, Patrick. That this could potentially be a reference to that character. At least the style. It's not. Gully is not the same as Roy Lincoln, and Roy Lincoln seems to have done this particular act as a saving act, and he is a hero in the comics. Gully, as we've seen this series, I don't know whether anybody would call him a hero. He's not a great guy as such, our Gully.
No.
Yeah.
No, but ultimately it's duty to his country. I guess it's coming from that perspective.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick, for that really good bit of feedback.
Yeah, that's really a great catch. Thanks, Patrick. But given all this commotion, given that the English League know that the Stormcloud vial is not is not real, that it's a fake, that actually it's already in place to be detonated. I think moving on to our second point of the English League, this causes Aziz to offer surrender, which Salt refuses.
Yep.
And with Salt saying, you can say goodbye, but I won't give you enough time to escape. I love the fact that there are some people in the English League there that go, right, see ya, I'm off, bye.
You'd have a go.
Yeah, so they make their way, and then others are resigning themselves. Effectively, this is where you get the big yes to the proposal of marriage. For both of them, ultimately. You know, that Martha stands her ground and says, I'm not going to try and leave. You know, Thomas's first reaction is, let's try and get you on a plane out of here as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And Martha's kind of, no, I've spent the last however many years of my life helping to defend the English League and be a part of this struggle. I want to stay here, but I want to be married to you. And you have this ceremony of marriage performed by Aziz.
Absolutely.
Who's really chipper about the fact that they've asked him.
I know, it's like, well, I might as well do it. We have nothing else to do. We're all going to die anyway. So why not have a lovely little ceremony? But I love that it is a really quick ceremony that Aziz gives. Very much, do you take her to be your wife? Do you take him to be your husband? Yes. Kiss the bride. Right. Off we go. So a wartime wedding for the Waynes. I like that. Nice little moment. And we do have Thomas and Martha Wayne married, going into season 2 with a baby on the way. Which we'll come back to.
We will come back to that for sure, because it is not the baby you think it might be.
Well, it's even more not the baby that you think it might be as well. Our prediction was also wrong on that front. We'll come back to it in a second. Our last major point is about the Raven Union, usually. But this time we have changed it to Bet and Peggy sites, dismantling the Raven Union, basically, with a couple of quick punches and a couple of quick kicks. We have Bet and Peggy still waiting in the penthouse for John Salt to arrive, because they've got his partner, Vicky DeFrench. They've used her to get themselves up to the penthouse. And we have, yes, another wonderful Peggy moment where she's, what's the phrase? Losing the rag, with John Salt. I love that she makes Vicky DeFrench take the first punch on Salt, makes her hit him, knocking him down, and then she can take action effectively. Bet can kick him and punch him as much as possible, trying to use a little bit of reverse psychology on her, when she finds the button, that controls, Stormcloud, trying to tell her, no, you can't press that button. Don't do it. Trying to get her to press the button, because he seems to know that that's the kind of thing that Bet would do. Once again, Peggy stepping in and kind of going, he's trying to be smart with you. Don't let him do it. Don't let him twist you. But ultimately, it comes down to that. It comes down to the battle over the activation button in Raven HQ. Addy gets to press it as well, and we know, because we've been seeing the other side of the battle, we know that they haven't been able to deactivate Stormcloud on the other side, but he does get to push the button in this scene here. So
he activates the detonation, which is kind of, because it seems, got to be an aerosol. You see it starting to fuse in the capsule that is in the church in London that Alfie and Lucius are all trying to diffuse and figure out what to do with it. So, I mean, there's some nice intercutting here.
Yeah.
I think the beating of John Salt by Peggy, it's again got, I guess it's the hair on John Salt. It kind of goes all curly and out of shape, and it's very comedic.
Oh no, it's not just the hair, it's also the teeth.
And the teeth in this case.
Brutalized by Bet as well, being kicked multiple times. And because he's pressed the button, we have Francis Gaunt in here in the room, and we have, eventually we have, Field Marshal Thursday arriving in with his forces to take down John Salt. He's pushed the button. They know this. They know he's gone mad. They know he's lost control of the Raven Union. So Raven Union is now back under control of Francis Gaunt.
Well, that's it, because we have this strange kind of thing right at the start where John Salt is flicking elastic bands at the army guards, and then fires them at Field Marshal Thursday, who, is then given the information that this is all going to happen anyway. And so very much John Salt has done this coup within the Raven Union structures, but sidelined the army. And of course,
just like we talked about last week, all
exactly.
of his men all wearing their kind of Nazi outfits for the Raven Union, and then they take Thursday away.
Yes, exactly.
And take all of his men away as well. So,
yeah. But it's interesting because I almost felt as well that John Salt, because he comes up to the penthouse because he's in his main office.
Yeah.
And he's there opening and closing the protector over the button.
Yeah.
It was almost felt like he was a little hesitant.
Oh, yeah.
There was some kind of realization of what impact and the consequences or the ramifications of pushing that button would have.
Absolutely.
And certainly given he's just declined the surrender of the English League.
Yeah.
The challenge by Field Marshal Thursday. And so he goes off up to his penthouse in order to kind of, I guess, maybe get away from those staring eyes, the eyes of judgment.
Remember, this is a reference to last episode when he told Elfie if he dropped Stormcloud, he would become the biggest mass murderer in the world and killing all of those innocents in the local towns in the area. And that's what he's about to become when he pushes that button. He's about to become a mass murderer. He may have murdered people, as we've seen. He's tortured and killed people in the past that we've seen on screen. He's led people to their death like Harwood. But now if he pushes that button on his own, he's becoming a mass murderer, effectively. So you hear him saying to himself, John, you can do this. John, this is your time. This is your moment. John, you can do this. So you hear him talking to himself like a crazy cartoon character that he is by this stage, the crazy comic book DC character, effectively, that he's become. So he's trying to talk himself into it, but it feels like he is hesitant, that he's not 100% sure.
And it feels that the intervention of Bet and Peggy Sykes here, because they take the trigger control away from him, it suddenly becomes about the plan that he's done. And so I don't want to be failed because of someone else. If I'm not going to hit the button because it's me making that decision, so be it.
Exactly.
But because they take away that trigger, he gets involved in a brawl to do it and manage it. It's almost like a thumb war that they have on the trigger. Yeah. But he manages to depress it. And that's when you see him become a bit maniacal, really, and with the kind of full set of bloody kind of broken teeth, he really does kind of like look like the crazy mad scientist that has developed this, who has become the crazy mad politician. So it's great visuals, I think, for John Salt, for sure, but he's ultimately carted away by Thursday, not Wednesday, with Francis Gaunt assuming or reassuming the role of the leader of the Raven Union.
I'm in control now. Yes.
And of course, with all of that, it seems like maybe the negotiation for peace between the two would happen on a level playing field. That where we saw them approach one another on the field when the intentions were deemed to be pure by at least the English League. So you kind of think maybe with Francis Gaunt there it would get better, but she
is certainly the more restrained of everybody that's involved in the Raven Union. She questioned Harwood when he was going off the deep end under the control of Salt, effectively. She clearly questioned Salt a bit too much, and that's why she ended off where she was as well. So with her in charge and with Thursday in charge. Now remember, Thursday, of course, is the one that's been saying that he was about to win the war. So he is certainly against the English League. He certainly he wouldn't be looking for peace. He would be looking for the win here. But you're right. Yeah, it cuts to our actual final point, our post-credit scene, almost our passage of time 6 months later. The battle actually rages on, is what we find. We cut to the opening scene where we have Thomas and Martha sitting on the couch. Martha now fully pregnant at this stage, bombs going off outside the house as they're watching broadcasts from the English League that get interrupted by the Raven Union's version of Blue Peter.
It really did look like that.
Yeah. Blue Peter being a British magazine show for children. It's got very upbeat hosts, always very positive, and they come in with a really positive vibe of don't adjust your sets. The Raven Union have taken over. You don't need to worry. Now we're in control from one end of the country to the other. So it feels like they have now broken into London at this stage, and they have broken the borders and starting to take control of London. At least BBC Television Centre that they've broken into and taken control of.
Yeah, it looks more like they've cut the signal and they're now broadcasting on their own frequency to get into every box set, TV box of anyone in London. And again, another great little aerial visual. I think they've done this really well this season of London being bombarded by the Raven Union missiles.
Absolutely. I just looked at my notes and realized, and I completely forgot what the actual broadcast that Thomas and Martha were watching. It was Sandra has made it as a big singer. She's on TV now. She's singing Rock and Roll Suicide, the David Bowie song, beautifully singing it once again. I love the choice of music that had been given to Sandra the whole way through this series. But that's the broadcast that Thomas and Martha are watching. Alfie's old girlfriend, who he dumped and then went back to, has now made it. So it is, at least she gets a nice happy ending for her story.
Yeah, exactly. But as the bombs rain down, Martha is going to go off and fight, but her waters break, and you see then
War baby.
A war baby, exactly. But it is a baby girl.
Yes, it is.
So that is the big craziness here that I mean, it's not crazy, but in terms of, I guess, the preconceptions that we had of, it could have been Bruce, but I know at least I thought that, Alfie was too young still compared to Gotham. And even if it maybe isn't a continuity, but that timeline would mean, he would be too young.
Yeah. I think when Bruno Heller announced that Martha was going to be pregnant this season, I think in general, most people thought pregnant with Bruce.
Yeah.
It was the concept. But we talked about it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, a couple of episodes ago. We were wondering whether her being pregnant, there is in continuity an older sibling to Bruce. There is a Thomas Wayne Jr. And we were going, do you think they'd do that? Do you think they'd pull the rug out of the major audience and go, we'll have Thomas Wayne Jr. here? Well, they went even further. They pulled the rug out of us, and they now have a sister, a Wayne girl has been born here. Now, one thing you always have to remember with comic books, and DC's probably got a bit more of this than Marvel do in general. Remember, Marvel has a big connected movie universe, so for the most part, they don't have multiverses at the moment. But in the TV series for the DC shows, like for example Flash on the CW will be the prime example of this. Every single character lives in a different universe. They regularly travel to Earth 1 through 99 or Earth 1 through 700 effectively. So they have multiple Earths where there's multiple different versions of the characters that we see, and they use that quite a lot in DC TV specifically. Marvel TV doesn't tend to use that very often. We know we're going into a multiverse time in Marvel Universe, so we may see some of that in the future. But for the most part, we don't see it very much in Marvel. It's mostly a DC thing. So what's happened here is there is now a continuity where Pennyworth, the TV show, and potentially Gotham, the TV show, live in their own DC universe.
Yeah.
In the same way that Supergirl, when it was originally created, was on its own universe, and then it moved over to where all the other CW shows sit. They're now all in the same universe. So I thought that was really interesting. The idea, obviously not beyond the realm of possibility that Thomas and Martha could have a girl in some other alternate universe, right? So it seems like another Earth story, right?
Absolutely. It really, really does. Yeah. So like Fair Jews again.
The Hellerverse, we'll call it, because I like the name, the Hellerverse.
That is a good name. I like that. Yes. But yeah, so again, I think as we were saying at the start, this would be really nice to see in a season 3 for sure.
We'll have a couple of years jump, 3 or 4 years, and then we have a young a young daughter of Thomas and Martha, and see how she's getting on.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, just to mention, you kind of mentioned earlier on as well, just Gaunt and Thursday are in control of the Raven Union. They are certainly leading this attack on London, which you kind of wouldn't have expected, as you mentioned. You kind of would have expected that they would have had some kind of overture towards the Raven Union and the English League coming together in some way, since all of this battle that happened. This might have been a turning point in this battle, but what we find is everybody, all of our main characters that we've been following are now in the English League. We have Alfie, Bet, Dave Boy, we have Katie as well, all on the front lines here. Katie and Bet specifically are trying to take down a tank from the Raven Union that has arrived in the city. London's looking very much in disarray from all the bombing that's been going on.
Yeah, proper urban warfare,
Exactly.
you know, with all the bricks and all the destruction sort of around and about. But it's there's a real funny moment where, you know, the Raven Union have got tanks, they've got machine guns, and, you know, it looks more like the English League are kind of, you know, resistance fighters. That really it is a matter of time. And then this bread van pulls up with Alfie and Dave Boy, and there's some really, like, funny, snidey remarks coming from the Raven Union soldiers.
Absolutely.
It's like, I'll have a ham and cheese sandwich, please, you know, and they start off with, is this a tank? No, it's a bloody bread van.
Exactly.
But out of this bread van does come the English League's secret weapon, which is a weaponized Gully Troy.
It feels like a Christmas tree, though.
As
he comes out.
Who is able now to fire, I guess, bolts of storm cloud out, directed at the Raven Union soldiers, who have that same effect where they go blue and then grey, almost like they turn to black and white.
Exactly.
TV footage.
Yeah.
And we have Lucius Fox there as well, bringing him out. So it looks like Lucius Fox has had a role in his development, should we say?
I think Lucius probably created the suit that he has to wear effectively to keep him alive. That's what I think has happened here. It's really interesting to see this moment, and a really fun moment, because it's such a surprise that Gully's still alive and he's the super powered soldier. Also interesting to note, Alfie is now a colonel in the English League. We see Bet talking to him like she knows him, basically, and he kind of says, "Have you forgotten your manners, soldier?" Effectively, so he is now now colonel in the English League. Real shocker, but also, you know, you don't think the English League were going to be winning this battle. You see some of the lads from the team running up with their rocket launcher, trying to take out the tank. One rocket misses completely, and the second one, he takes so long setting up the shot that they all get blown away and killed. So, you know, if guerrilla warfare has to be quick and you have to maintain cover, or else this may happen to you. But yes, that is our final moment. We have Pennyworth and the boys going over the top, effectively. Pennyworth in the lead of Katie and Bet, and now superpowered Gully, who does look like Mr. Freeze, as you mentioned earlier on. Going into the final battle with the Raven Union.
Yeah, I mean, it feels really comic booky, actually, with Gully in that suit. That's where it's kind of like, it feels the link to Gotham has maybe started, seeing this super fueled, I guess, in a super powered protagonist in this episode.
Were you expecting the moment? Because when we, not to keep going back to Gotham, but back in Gotham, there was a moment where all of our major cast, I think at the end of the middle of season 5, I think it was, where the whole of the cast of our team of Gotham got together to battle the attackers, shouting "For Gotham" out loud to the air as they went into battle. It really felt like you could have had a "For London" moment here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where Alfie shouted that out in the lead. But that's where we leave Pennyworth, the show, Pennyworth season 2, with this battle still raging. So we had hoped that the battle would be over, the war would be over, and that maybe season 3, if there is one, would move on, and we'd have a resolution to that. That didn't happen. We still have that war raging on. No clear winner here at the moment. But if Gully's able to do that to every person that he comes across, it may not be a long war.
Absolutely
He just
not.
has to be placed in the right position to attack everybody and take them all out. And we have a baby girl for Thomas and Martha, another shocker. And at least Sandra's made it, I suppose.
Yeah, she certainly has. And fair dues to Sandra. She has shown everyone that she can do it. So good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Any notes about the episode, John?
Just a quick one. I for some reason didn't mention it when we were talking about Mr. and Mrs. P coming back together again or reintroduced to one another. But there is a real emotional moment where Alfred has gone off to save London from the real storm cloud device, which is, just a moment shared between Mr. Pennyworth and Mrs. Pennyworth. And, she feels she's got her husband back, that, they can begin to rebuild, but it's in this moment where Alfie's dad pulls the plug on himself, on his life support system,
Yes.
and passes away, in effect killing himself.
Yeah.
As his wife has gone back to get some tea or some biscuits.
nice
For,
bicky.
there's also a slight comedic touch to it because the sound of the machine turning off is effectively like a dead line telephone from an old style telephone where it's like beep, 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 beep. It's very kind of, the Star Trek kind of thing as well.
We used to have landlines at home when
Yeah.
we were younger, both of us, because we're old now. But we used to have landlines, and you would hear the deadline tone very often on phone lines. So, it really did sound like it. And I know the way you're making it sound, it does actually sound like the machine in a hospital as well. But that's why they chose it.
Yes,
and probably for some of our younger listeners and younger viewers of Pennyworth, they may not recognize that tone and may think it is a hospital tone, but it is a phone line going dead.
Yes.
What I also love about the scene is she's having the conversation with him as he's dying, and she calls him a silly sod, basically, and that's when his green light goes to red. So the moment he dies, that's what he hears. She doesn't hear any of the complimentary things that Mrs. P says about him afterwards, or the other criticisms that she says about him afterwards. He dies mid-conversation.
But it is actually a really touching moment where she kind of cups his hand when she realizes that he's dead and that, the plug has been taken out effectively. He's disconnected his ventilator that keeps him breathing.
Yeah.
And, they have a real nice little conversation beforehand where, she says, at last you're being sensible, and he says, no, I'm not being sensible, I'm being sentimental. He's happy that he's finally back with his wife who has forgiven him
but still won't admit he was wrong.
Still won't admit that he's wrong, but ultimately...
I'm not being sensible. Because if I was being sensible, I'd still do the same thing. I wouldn't have told you about storytelling. I'm being sentimental to keep your family. Yeah, exactly. So that is a funny little moment for him that he's still not admitting that he's wrong. He still believes in his beliefs, but for his wife and for his son, he'll save them. Yeah.
And I think that he is dying here anyway. I think the suit is prolonging his life rather than a permanent way of keeping him alive until old age, So, it's just should mention, the death of Mr. Pennyworth as well. Because as well, Alfred is not there to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's it for our coverage of Pennyworth Season 2. John, how would you rate the episode?
I would give this 4 crazy machine gun toting chaplains out of 5. This is not your kind of usual final episode. It's got a lot of intrigue in there with the baby girl born to Martha and Thomas.
Yep.
Like, fantastic. And I really hope Season 3, if there is one, can just explore that. That would be really, really interesting. You have real crazy comic booky side of things with Gully and with Stormcloud and Gully becoming, human bomb and this new weapon that is being used to defeat the Raven Union. You have some really emotional moments in the Pennyworth household between Dad, Mum, and Alfie.
Yeah.
And I think it really kind of pulls things nicely together for this season 2. And I think, if Bruno Heller was looking to, establish this foursome of Lucius, Thomas, Martha, and Alfred Pennyworth, those four pillars that are supporting Bruce Wayne in the future and are an inspiration to him during his life, then he has set that up. And I think it's all massively interesting and intriguing to think what can be taken further with a season 3. So we'll see if we get a season 3. Who knows? But certainly, we have the death of John Salt. We see the dispossession of John Salt from the Raven Union High Command. We see Francis Gaunt being a ruthless, as Field Marshal Thursday in terms of pushing their advantage and just in conventional warfare. And so, this really does wrap it up. So, I really kind of enjoyed this. I think the emotional moments coupled with the more comic book and the weirdness, the wonderful weirdness that I think you can really get from these episodes was fantastic.
Yep. True.
And so,
style.
really good.
Yeah. And just a reminder at the end of this season, remember this was a show that was filming half before COVID and then got shut down. I remember Jack Bannon was in a conversation around the time that they went back to filming and were finishing up the season. And he was saying at the time that things had to change. Quite clearly, they came back and were filming during the time of COVID. They were one of the first shows back filming. And he said that a lot of scenes where there would have been big battle sequences or big fight sequences had to be changed. So you had things like, I would presume, the standoff that we had in Raven Union headquarters where lots of people are around, kind of at a distance, pointing guns at each other. You kind of expect from the history of Alfred Pennyworth in the show, that would be a bit of a punch up. There'd be a bit of a dust up there going on with them. A lot of those scenes had to be filmed differently. But I think they accomplished a really good ending for the show. We've seen at least one other show that ended this year that had some quite severe restrictions where we lost some major characters didn't get the end of their stories. I'm talking about WandaVision here, John. Where
absolutely.
Some major characters didn't get the end of their stories because they couldn't come back for filming at the end, effectively. So I think they did a really good job of wrapping up the story the way they did and making it feel like it was still as epic as the show has been for these last 2 seasons. So I'm really hopeful to see what happens if they get a 3rd season. Having worked under those kind of restrictions, I suppose. Let's see what they would get in future.
Definitely.
We do have some feedback for our final episode. We did hold off on recording our final episode until after it aired, so we did get some feedback in. First up, Patrick Lemke responded to our episode last week, our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast. He says, great listen. I'm hoping for a 3rd season of the show. In terms of where Alfred's story could go next, considering he'll likely be the country's hero by the end of season, maybe he gets another offer as an MI6 agent. After the Raven Union is dealt with, there could be other threats he could face before going to the US. I'm reminded of a line in Season 1, Episode 4 in the news broadcast about Germany and Netherlands. That could be a potential issue at the show's time that Alfred, as an MI6 agent, could deal with.
Yeah, that could be really, really interesting. Thanks, Patrick, for that. And certainly, it could tie into Thomas Wayne's CIA credentials, and also with Martha possibly still being employed as an advisor to the English League about maybe removing other authoritarian regimes from around Europe.
Yeah. That is, of course, when the Raven Union is dealt with, because they're still not dealt with at the end of the season, but looking more likely and a little more powerful now that we have Gully on side. Thanks so much for that, Patrick. Also over on Twitter, Debbie Fincham says, great twists, fantastic action scenes, bring on season 3 after watching the finale. Yeah, Debbie, totally with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great twists indeed, Debbie. Yeah.
Dulshan Bashitha says, it's a girl? I mean, how? Batman never had a sister, so I thought. Combed through everywhere just to find a clue about who she is. So far, nothing. I need some frickin' answers here.
I don't think there are any answers except for the answer provided by Pennyworth, Dulshan. I think this is a wholly new thing, a holy guacamole new thing for Batman. And for the Waynes. And the origin is in this show that it was a love child between Thomas and Martha Wayne, that has in part brought them together to be married. And I guess we have no clues other than that.
Well, my speculation is that it's just another Earth, just like all the DC comic properties that have gone to movies and TV. They've created another Earth here. You know, they've made reference to the fact that Michael Keaton's Batman in the movies is on a completely different Earth to Christian Bale's version of Batman is on a different Earth to Ben Affleck's version of Batman. You know, all of those are on different Earths. So what we're seeing here, I think, is another Earth where it's just a sister that Bruce Wayne has. Not as massively shocking as some of the other ones we've had. We've had an entire movie where the Joker thinks that he's Bruce Wayne's brother, that he's born to Thomas Wayne and was thrown into a psychiatric facility, right? So if that's possible, surely it's possible that there's another universe where a sister is born, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dulchan did respond to that and said, so they're adding another Earth to the equation? Like we haven't had enough. Thank God for Crisis in that matter. But anyways, that's a possibility. Excellent. And a great answer. Crisis on Infinite Earths is when they brought all of those various Earths back together, I suppose.
Yes, a consolidation and rationalization of the DC universe.
Exactly. So good thoughts as well, Dulchan. Over on email, Victor Seller sent us an email.
Yes, Victor says, greetings all. I'm a Marvel defender, but could not resist commenting on this season and your podcasts. I truly enjoyed the arc of the Psych Sisters and Bet's beatdown of Salt. Was shocked at the newly married Waynes expecting a daughter. I suppose much more will happen before Bruce's arrival. I question how a couple of their experience were killed by a street thug in Gotham. Congrats on your great podcast. Yours, Victor Von Doom. Yeah, thanks so much, Victor, for this. I completely agree. As soon as you mention it, I absolutely understand your reasoning around, with their experience in general warfare, in espionage, in subterfuge, and being kind of, pragmatic and all that, a street thug in Gotham could have been overcome. But I guess as well, they were just unlucky.
Maybe, yeah. Remember, they were at a point where they weren't expecting anything to happen. They'd just gone out to the opera with Bruce for the evening, or the cinema, depending on which version of the movies or the comics that you've seen. They were completely caught unawares by a street thug. And I'm not sure whether Thomas is that much of a fighter.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I think Thomas is a bit of a talker, and that's kind of what happens. Effectively, at least in the majority of the stories, street thug tries to steal from Martha. Thomas tries to talk him down, and the street thug shoots Martha and then shoots Thomas to cover up the murder of Martha. There's loads of other versions of this story. That's the general story. There's some where he's a hired killer, like in Gotham, who's hired to kill the Waynes specifically, so he's an experienced street thug. But the majority of them is it all goes wrong because Thomas tries to talk him out of stealing from them. And that's why it goes wrong. So I can actually see this version of Thomas and Martha falling into that situation. But excellent. Great to hear that you're following along with us, Victor. I know you're going to be following along with us for Falcon the Winter Soldier over on our TV podcast industry's coverage of that show as well. So great to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks again, Victor. Over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV podcast industries, Angie Ahu says, well, that was interesting. Didn't see any of that coming. What is Gully supposed to be? And a Wayne girl? I sure hope there is a season 3 so that these mysteries are explained. Thanks for another great podcast on this season, guys.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Angie. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting indeed. I think Gully is just a weaponized version of Stormcloud in human form, basically. Yeah. But I mean,
he's a comic book character now, basically. Yeah,
yeah. But it's great to have possible connections with the human bomb, as was given by Patrick. I think that's a nice little tie-in. It certainly adds a more comic element to the season so far. Yeah. And to the whole series in general, I think. Yeah. A season 3 would be great for some of these mysteries. Maybe to see a bit more creep with superpowered individuals coming into maybe the non-Gotham verse, seeing that it's maybe a global phenomenon and stuff. So yeah, interesting.
Now, showrunners and writers of shows don't always get what they want, but initially Bruno Heller and Danny Cannon, who created this series after Gotham, did say they always approach these types of shows hoping to get 5 seasons. That's their kind of arc. That they hope to get as 5 seasons. So when they make these kind of big moments and big declarations of what's happening, it is aiming to get to a point where in the future, as I think Bruno Heller described it, in the future there will be a world that will need a Batman, will need superheroes to take care of it. And the way he's seeing it is we're back in the 60s here. We are at the start of that world. So, so things will start to creep up over time where you will need a world that will need all the superheroes. So that's their approach, I suppose. So, if we don't get a season 3, I'm reminded of, I think, was it Star Trek, The Next Generation, that had the moment where they turned Captain Picard into a Borg and ended the season there, not even knowing if they had a following season. So they ended up with this really dark moment, a corner that they couldn't write themselves out of effectively on purpose, so that they would be hired on for a next season to explain what would happen. So I wonder if Bruno Heller has used that trick here. How does he write himself out of this corner that he's put himself in at the end of season 2?
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Angie. And finally, Shelby Dockery echoes the thoughts on Facebook of a lot of people watching Pennyworth. She says, I can't wait to watch and hopefully get a season 3 renewal too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a season 3 would be really nice for this show, given, I think, the ending of the Wayne girl, as Angie says, and also I think with Gully and superheroes being kind of introduced for the first time into the show. I think it'll be really, really take it in a different way. Be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's hope we hear some more from Bruno Heller over the next couple of months. If they do start filming again, traditionally they start filming sometime towards the summertime. So we've got a few months to wait before any kind of confirmation will be coming out about a season 3. But I'm excited to see what they do in the future. Even if they take it up and do comic books from the scripts that Bruno Heller has written, I'd be happy to read them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great having fresh, new approaches to a world that we know.
Exactly. Once again, fellow Gothamites and fellow governors, thanks so much for joining us for another season of Bruno Heller's Hellerverse. Yeah? Hashtag restore the Hellerverse. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast over on TV Podcast Industries. You can find all of our podcasts over there. As we mentioned, we've been covering Falcon the Winter Soldier and also Invincible on a weekly basis. We'd love if you joined us for those podcasts. We will return if there is a Pennyworth season 3 on the Pennyworth feed, and we hope you return to join us for any of one of our upcoming podcasts.
Yeah, thank you so much, fellow governors and fellow Gothamites, for joining us on this final episode chit-chat on season 2 of Pennyworth. It has been great speaking to you as always, and can't wait to speak to you again soon. Bye.
Slán Siobhan.
Slán Siobhan. Bye.